When my wife carried a few heavy boxes into our new cabin, the HOA president called the cops. She was convinced we were hiding something dangerous. At first, I thought it was just another power-hungry neighbor trying to stir drama. But when the officer arrived and opened those containers, the truth came crashing out. My wife had been keeping secrets that even I didn't fully understand. Secrets that would leave the entire neighborhood stunned. And when the cop looked at her, paused, and then saluted, every jaw dropped. This is how Karen tried to ruin us, and destroyed herself instead. It was supposed to be a calm start. A fresh chapter. My wife Julia and I had just bought a quiet little cabin in Pine Ridge, a place we thought would be our escape from city chaos. Early that Saturday morning, we pulled up with our moving truck. The air was cool, birds chirping, the kind of day you imagine when you think peaceful retreat. But peace doesn't last long when you live under the iron rule of an HOA. Julia immediately got to work. She's efficient like that, no wasted motion. Box by box, she unloaded these large, rugged containers. They weren't cardboard, but heavy-duty, military-grade cases. Each one was sealed, stacked perfectly, and marked with faded stenciled codes that didn't look like they came from Home Depot. The moment Julia set the first one down, I noticed blinds twitching across the street. Neighbors were peeking out like we were unloading contraband. By the time she carried in the third case, kids on bikes had stopped, watching curiously. It should have been just another moving day. But looking back, those containers were the spark. Because Pine Ridge was about to find out exactly who Julia was, and the truth was more explosive than anything they imagined. Enter Grace Perez, the self-appointed queen of Pine Ridge, better known as HOA Karen. Picture a short, sharp-tongued woman marching across our driveway like she owned it, binder clutched to her chest like a holy relic. She didn't even say hello. Her opening line was, "Excuse me, you cannot move those items without permits." Julia, calm as ever, didn't even acknowledge her. She just kept working, lifting containers like they were empty. Grace's face turned red. She wasn't used to being ignored. Her voice rose, piercing the morning air. These containers require inspection under HOA guidelines, Section 4.7. Still, Julia said nothing. She moved with that quiet precision that made Grace's shouting look ridiculous. Neighbors started drifting closer. Phones appeared, recording. Grace basked in the attention, convinced she was about to put us in our place. I leaned against the truck, sipping coffee, watching it unfold like a bad sitcom. Grace wasn't just a nosy neighbor. What I didn't know then was that she had bigger problems. Debts, a foreclosure notice, and a desperate need to hold on to power. And when Julia didn't bow down to her authority, it wasn't just insulting. It was dangerous. Grace wasn't about to let this go. The more Julia ignored her, the louder Grace became. She jabbed her finger at the boxes. "That's tactical gear. Those are weapons." Julia finally broke her silence, cool and calm. "That's a resistance band. For physical therapy." The crowd chuckled. Grace's face went crimson. But she doubled down, whipping out her phone. "That's it. I'm calling the police. Suspicious military-style containers. A hostile resident refusing compliance." The words echoed. Neighbors gasped, some shaking their heads, others pulling out their own phones. One man, David Brooks, reluctantly recorded. He looked miserable, sweating in the cool air, like he didn't want to be there at all. At the time, I figured he was just embarrassed. Later, I'd find out the truth behind his guilt, and why Grace had him wrapped around her finger. By now, the atmosphere had shifted. People weren't just curious. They were waiting, like an audience before the curtain rises. You could feel it. Something was about to happen. And then, in the distance, flashing lights appeared. A patrol car rolled slowly into our driveway. Grace's expression twisted into pure satisfaction. Her trap had been set. But she had no idea. The snare was about to snap shut on her instead. The patrol car door opened, and out stepped Officer Mitchell. Middle-aged, tall, and clearly exhausted from a career of handling nonsense calls. "Officer, thank God you're here." Grace waved her binder like a victory flag. These people are moving dangerous containers into the community. Weapons, surveillance, who knows what else? Mitchell didn't look impressed. He scanned the crowd, the phones, the containers, and finally Julia. Julia stood still, hands on hips, gaze steady. Not defensive. Not nervous. Just calm. Grace rattled off her threat assessment, growing louder with each word, while neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Julia quietly stacked another box, unbothered. Mitchell turned to her with professional courtesy. Would you mind showing me some ID? Just so we can clear this up. Grace smirked, certain she'd won. But when Julia pulled out her wallet and handed over her card, Mitchell's expression changed. He stuttered it once. Twice. His eyes narrowed, then widened. Something clicked. He looked up at Julia with recognition. Dispatch, he muttered into his radio, running a check. The crowd hushed. Grace leaned in, whispering to a neighbor, watch. She'll be exposed. But when the radio crackled back, the words silenced everyone. Confirmed. Active security clearance. Decorated veteran. The shift was immediate. Mitchell straightened. His tone softened. He said to Julia, thank you for your service. Then, he saluted. The crowd gasped. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Grace's jaw fell open. She stammered, that doesn't mean anything. Veterans can be dangerous too. Those boxes. Mitchell cut her off. These are standard military containers. Nothing unusual. But Grace wasn't done. Her voice climbed higher, desperate. You have to check them. Under HOA emergency security powers, I demand inspection. Neighbors murmured. Some shook their heads. One elderly woman muttered, Grace, honey, stop embarrassing yourself. Mitchell turned back to Julia. Technically, I can't search without cause. But if you're willing to open a container, it might put this to rest. Julia gave a single, sharp nod. Not defensive. Not afraid. Just, sure. Mitchell knelt, hands on the latch. Grace pressed closer, practically trembling with anticipation. Phones lifted. Everyone leaned in. The latch snapped open. The lid rose. Sunlight hit the contents. And what they revealed wasn't weapons. It was something far more shocking. Something that made Officer Mitchell freeze in reverence, and made Grace's face drain of color. Inside lay a velvet-lined display case. Medals gleamed in precise foam cutouts, arranged with military precision. Front and center, the Bronze Star. Not just any Bronze Star, the V device for Valor. Mitchell's voice lowered, heavy with respect. This is awarded for heroism in combat. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A war hero. Is she Delta Force? Grace stumbled backward, face pale. Those could be fakes. But Mitchell leaned closer, tracing engravings, serial numbers. His jaw set. No. These are authentic. He looked at Julia differently now, not as a suspect, but as someone who'd seen more than anyone here could imagine. Grace tried again. You don't understand. Veterans can be unstable. But her words fell flat. Neighbors frowned, muttering. Someone snapped, you just insulted a veteran. Mitchell saluted again, and this time the crowd erupted in applause. Phones recorded every second, capturing Grace's humiliation. But Grace wasn't finished. Desperation burned in her eyes. She needed to be right. Needed control. And that meant dragging this further, straight into her own downfall. Fake. All fake. Grace shrieked, voice cracking. Those medals mean nothing unless we see what else is in there. Mitchell sighed, clearly done with her antics. But Julia, calm as ever, gestured for him to continue. He opened the next case. Inside, challenge coins. Dozens of them. Elite unit insignias, classified missions, Black Ops unit civilians had never heard of. Mitchell's hand paused on one coin, matte black with silver edges. His eyes widened. This is Tier 1. Delta Force. The crowd gasped. Phones shook as people zoomed in. Whispers turned to outright shock. Grace's knees buckled. But still, she tried, anyone can buy those online. Mitchell turned, steel in his voice. No. These can't be faked. I served. I know. By now, neighbors were openly hostile toward Grace. Calls of enough, and apologize, rose from the crowd. Grace's face twisted. Her power, gone. Her reputation, shattered. But instead of backing down, she did what desperate people always do. She went further. Straight off the cliff. Mitchell closed the final case, his tone final. Everything here is authentic. This woman has risked more for this country than you'll ever understand. The crowd clapped again, louder. Some neighbors even approached Julia to thank her. Grace's voice cut through, shrill and broken. This is all a setup. She's dangerous. She could turn on us. But nobody believed her anymore. Someone shouted, "You should resign." Another, "You're embarrassing the whole neighborhood." Grace's desperation boiled over. She screamed, binder shaking in her hands. "You're all blind. I'm the only one protecting this community." But the image was clear. A frantic woman, red-faced, flailing in front of a calm veteran and a weary cop. Mitchell lowered his voice to Grace. This is your fourth false report this month. I suggest you stop." The words hit her like a hammer. The crowd murmured in disgust. For the first time, Grace realized she had no allies. Still, she stormed away, shrieking threats. "This isn't over. You'll all regret crossing me." But as she fled, one truth had already settled over Pine Ridge. Grace wasn't the authority anymore. She was the disgrace. The neighborhood shifted that day. Julia, once a stranger, became a hero. Neighbors stopped us to shake her hand. Kids asked questions. Even the skeptical ones now looked at her with respect. Grace, meanwhile, vanished behind closed blinds. Her power, her influence, gone in an instant. The Queen of Pine Ridge dethroned by her own arrogance. I looked at Julia that night, medals packed away, calm as ever. She just smiled faintly. Bullies always expose themselves. Logan. You just have to wait. She was right. Grace had tried to destroy us with lies. Instead, she destroyed herself with the truth. But as we settled into our cabin, one thought lingered. Grace had muttered, "This isn't over." And knowing her desperation, her financial troubles, her obsession with control, I believed it. The battle was won. But the war with Grace? That was just beginning.